Record. All right, flipping you around. All right, there's the class. Wave hello to Eric. Oh, they can't see you yet. Hang on, let
Hey
me.
everyone, I can see them.
There, now everything's working, and I'll
All
allow
right.
share anything. And all right, cool. Um, Class. This is Erik Bustillo. Eric and I met quite a long time ago through ISSM before he was an RD. Actually, that's when you had on your tag RD to be for quite a while, and that was probably how many years ago was that? 12 years.
Uh, 12 and a half. Yeah. It was during my internship to be a dietitian. So, yeah, it was 2012.
So Eric's. I wanted Eric to come on for several reasons. He's got a wide variety of interests and background and practical application from the textbook knowledge that we've been learning in here for the first third of the semester anyway. Has run his own business. He's been involved in corporations. I think he can give us some insight into jobs in the market where you might be able to apply your skills. So it's not just your own business like we've heard from some other speakers, but also getting involved in other things. He also does work for military services. He's been the vice president of the International Society of Sport Nutrition, and he's just a good person. Every time Eric's around, we have a good time, and I just appreciate his approach to life, which is make the world a better place, right?
Amen to that.
So, Eric, maybe we can just start with a little bit of um, your trajectory to here in a couple of minutes, and then if you want to share something, can do that, or you can provoke us with some questions, and we can have some dialogue today. And I know you said maybe through like 10:30 or 10:40, and then we'll wrap it up and call it good.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Ormsby, for the intro. Thank you all for being in class today. I appreciate that, as does Dr. Ormsby for sure. So yeah, my name is Erik Bustillo. I'm from Miami, Florida, so I'm not too far from where you all are right now. It's about a 7-hour drive. Interestingly enough, I've been to Tallahassee once, and after making that drive, I said I never wanted to do this again. Um, but that was also before I was as close friends as I am now with Dr. Ormsby, and I would definitely make the drive to go and hang out with him. Um, so as far as my background and everything goes, also if you're on social media, feel free to give me a follow, ask some questions. I'm probably most active on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's just my name altogether at Erik Bustillo. Um, I try to be interactive on there, answering questions and posting informative things. Um, I've been a dietitian for about 12 years, coming up on 12 years. Um, and I've had quite a variety of work experience. So uh, in my dietetic internship, that's kind of where things all begin from a professional standpoint. I had the opportunity to work in or intern in a place called Meals on Wheels, which was like a community service type of rotation for my internship. Um, I also did management, like food service management at FIU, which is where I went to undergrad, Florida International University. Um, and I also got to rotate at a long-term care facility, which is interesting. Those places definitely uh, give some perspective on life, right? Spend some time in a nursing home if you want some perspective in many ways, right? Am I living life to the fullest? And it's also nice to kind of give back. Some people just want somebody to talk with, you know. And as a dietitian, or even as a coach or trainer, you'll find that that's the case for a lot of people. They just want someone to talk with, and we can be that person to listen and offer feedback as needed. Um, for those of you that do become dietitians, you'll find that uh, you are someone's therapist as well, just without the term. But maybe some of you are already doing that for your friends and family, right? Um, long-term care facility. I also got to rotate with a former Knoll, or I don't know if you're former Knoll or maybe once a Knoll, always a Knoll, Dr. Doug Kalman. Um, So I got to get some research experience there and some sport nutrition as well in my internship. And then my final rotation was a clinical rotation down here in at Baptist Hospital in Miami. Um, anyway, that's kind of like where some of my background started, and just kind of like learning things, learn what you want to do, what you don't want to do. So when I started working, as soon as I graduated, I got a job working at a doctor's office, and that was a really cool gig. I was there for about 5.5 years. Excuse me. And I got to meet a lot of people, learn a lot of things from a business standpoint, how the business is run. I also got to learn what it's like to work with people that are good teammates and not so good teammates. I don't think we ever want to be the not so good teammate. Um, and what was interesting about this job was that I was like the program director for the wellness department in the cardiologist's office, which is not very common to see. And what was also cool about this place is that they had a metabolic cart. So I got to run, I don't even know, probably hundreds of metabolic carts. Um, and I would go over those results as well as go over blood work with the patients and educate them on how to make lifestyle changes, and even from a performance standpoint. So I've had the opportunity to work with Major League Baseball players, WNBA, NFL, tennis, golf, just a bunch of different athletes. So that gig was a pretty cool job for me. Um, Eventually ended up not working there anymore. I was the dietitian for the FIU football team for about a year and a half, while I was still working at the cardiologist office. The FIU thing was a very part-time thing, a very interesting experience there, but cool nonetheless. Um, and then I don't know if some of you all are familiar with Lane Norton, Dr. Lane Norton. He goes as BioLane on the interwebs, and I did some stuff for him as like his dietitian for his team. This was before his coaching like really blew up, and he has a bunch of people like on as a team now. But I was a dietitian who would basically sign off on his plans for his clients. So in the state of Florida, um, at the time, you needed to be a dietitian to like work with someone, like giving macros and um, creating a meal plan and whatnot. Uh, so now that's kind of changed a little bit. At least it's almost like anyone could work with someone as far as nutrition is concerned, but when it comes to specific things like medical nutrition therapy and all that, you still got to be a dietitian. So I did that, and I wrote a couple articles for Lane as well. Um, I also got into working with a company that does corporate wellness. So I was there for about 4.5 years, and that was a really cool experience for me too, doing one-on-one health coaching, educating on blood work, lifestyle change, using motivational interviewing to help people create lifestyle changes. And something else that was pretty cool about that job was that I got to do a good bit of education, like seminars, like lunch and learns and those things. Um, and then I was working at for this company. So the company that I was employed by, they have or had, I don't know if they still do, a contract with a municipality down here in South Florida. So I was working with the municipality. So that was from the mayor to different council members to police, fire, people who run the water and sewage department, people who cut the grass of any city employee. Um, if you guys can, just give me 1 second. Let me plug in my computer here really quick. I just got a low battery notification. I do apologize about that. Um, so in working there, it was pretty cool because I got to work with a whole bunch of different kinds of people. And during the pandemic, that was when obviously remote work became more of a thing. Um, and I've always had this passion for working with tactical athletes, right? So if you're not familiar with the tactical athlete, which I believe you all are, um, you're looking at police, fire, military, and working in a municipality. I had access to police and fire. So I approached the chief of the police department, and basically, long story short, when it comes to these guys, I started a CrossFit class for their police department. So I would program the workouts, and I would coach the classes, and it was fun. A lot of camaraderie, very competitive, and people got very fit doing that. So that was pretty cool. Um, all while I was working there, I also started getting involved with a company called O2X. I don't know if anyone is familiar with O2X, but O2X is a company that was started up by a few former Navy SEALs. And essentially, what we do at O2X is we put on um, workshops for tactical athletes. So through O2X, I've had the opportunity to I've done well over 100 workshops now, thousands of lives that I've been able to get in contact with. And I mean, I've done stuff with police and fire departments throughout the country. I've done stuff with the Navy from San Diego to Rhode Island. Um, I've had the opportunity to work with like the FBI, just other like government groups and whatnot, and that's been really awesome. Um, from doing group workshops to one-on-one consultations. Um, and then once I left that corporate wellness uh, job that I was at, due to just some differences in not particularly liking where things were going, um, a buddy of mine who has a coaching company, nutrition and fitness coaching. They're called Gifted Performance. They approached me about starting something more on the wellness front. So now we have that as well, where we approach companies and essentially try to offer wellness coaching and seminars for their employees. Um, and with all of that, I've been involved in research throughout my career, helping with writing papers, um, helping with in whatever which way that I can. I always tell my friends in academia that if they ever need participants for studies, I have a bunch of CrossFit friends that would more than likely be happy and willing to be a part of a study. So as far as my credentials go, I'm a registered dietitian. I have my master's in applied exercise science and sports nutrition. Uh, I am a certified sport nutritionist through the ISSN. I've also have a personal training certification through the NSCA. I'm a strength coach through the NCSF. I'm also a level 2 CrossFit. And something that not too many people know is that earlier this year I started a PhD program as well, and that's in exercise science. Um, and I'm pretty sure that I'm missing some things there, but that was a very long elevator ride as to the history of my background, basically.
Thanks, E. That's really helpful. I think to share the scope of what you've been involved with, and it gives some ideas for possible job opportunities for the students in this room. Where do you want to go from here, Eric? Do you want to share anything, or do you want to hop into like pre-programmed questions, or what would you like?
Yeah, I'm open to do questions for sure. I want the students to get the most out of this, and I'm happy to answer any question too, because as a dietitian, and when people learn that you have some sort of like a background in exercise as well, you're gonna get so many questions. So you'll get questions from body composition to performance to medical things to questions about like pesticides and herbicides and all of that sort of thing. So it's a pretty cool, diverse background. But yeah, I'm happy to jump into some Q&A here.
Yeah, let's do that. That's fine.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Sure
Um,
thing.
so I think one of the questions that I seem to like ask myself a lot is in terms of like all of the credentialing and stuff that you have already, how beneficial is it to have all of those to your name? Because like I have to think from a practicality standpoint, not every single day you put those hats on, but within all of the careers that you've held, like is there one side of that where it makes more sense to have all of those, or is it better just to have all of them and kind of just have them just in your utility belt, for lack of better words?
That's a good question. I they're definitely not needed. I'll say that. It's one of those things that, like, my personal training certification, I got it before I was even a dietitian. I was doing my internship, and I took the NSCA test, passed it, and I've just maintained the credential since then. I hardly do any one-on-one personal training. Excuse me. My sport nutrition certification, the one through ISSN, the CISSN, I got that one the year that I became a dietitian. Excuse me. And that credential in particular, I officially, I've probably never really needed it. Maybe it helped when I got the gig with FIU, but I think that was just because like I knew someone and they were like, "Hey, Erik is good at what he does," so they introduced me to the person. But there might be some jobs that would require having that certification. And as a dietitian, the one that's really big in the dietetics world is the CSSD. So that's like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, like version of a certified a sport dietitian, basically. My strength coach certification, I've really never needed that for anything that I've done. That one I actually just got it because I went to a seminar with a friend of mine, and it ended up being that by attending the seminar, you got access to take the test. And then I had completely forgotten about the test and it was going to expire because the 6 month mark was coming up. So my eligibility was going to expire. So I was like, screw it. I might as well just take the test. And just kind of knowing what I knew, I passed the test and I've just maintained that credential. The CrossFit certification, technically, I don't need that one because the CrossFit gym that I'm involved with down here in South Florida, I do coach classes pretty often and it's a lot of fun. And it's just really cool to be able to make an impact on people's lives uh, on a pretty much daily basis, right? Because I don't know if you've all ever done a CrossFit class or any sort of group fitness, but going into working out there, it's for some people it's like the best hour that they're gonna have in the day. It's this like social setting, and you get to de-stress and get fit and see friends and so on. So to help people in that way is pretty cool. But the reason that I'm involved with CrossFit Coconut Grove down here is because they brought me on as their dietitian to be the dietitian for the members and just the community. So I have my office in the gym where I have my InBody machine and I do one-on-one coaching in there with people. But I also coach classes. And I started coaching in the CrossFit gym when I actually got my strength coach certification. I didn't even have the level 1 or the level 2. I eventually got the L1 and L2 just because I wanted to, and the company that I was working for paid for them. So I saved myself a couple $1,000s in certification money by the company paying for it, which was pretty nice. But I didn't technically need it. And then I think those are all the certifications. So I haven't really needed any of the certifications that I've used, but they've all come in handy in some way. Of course, being a dietitian, that one, yes, that one, it's a job requirement, especially depending on what you want to do. Um, Anyone can give nutrition advice. Being a dietitian, we hopefully have the skills in understanding research and the science and knowing how to communicate with people, like not scaring the crap out of people about like seed oils, for example, but having a conversation with them and helping them understand what they're trying to get out of this conversation that they have with us. So to kind of wrap up my answer to that question, uh, these certifications, they're not really needed in general. For me, have they been helpful? I think so. I think in some cases, the knowledge gained from having them, for preparing to study for them, and the CEUs, the continuing education that comes along with them, is certainly helpful. Even though I know that's a business model for organizations to continue to get money through continuing education and renewing your certification, it is still valuable in continuing to learn things that are going on in our fields. But the most important thing with these certifications is what you are going to do with them. Does the job that you are applying for, does it require that you have any of these certifications or credentials? If it does, then they definitely come in handy. If it doesn't, then I mean, at least you have the knowledge, but there's a good chance that, you won't get paid more for having that. Even like in my previous job, I got my master's while I was working there. And it did nothing for my pay. Even though I was applying some of the stuff, they were like, yeah, it's not really a credential for this. So, congratulations, but we're not going to pay you more for it. Um, so yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, but if it does, then great. If it doesn't, then I'm happy to go deeper into anything.
Eric, thanks for that. I think I just want to sort of piggyback off what you said, because all those credentials in specific scenarios, I feel like you indicated quite well you don't need, but altogether, those things create Erik Bustillo, who is more qualified than the person who has no certifications. So if I'm going to pick somebody to work with, I want someone who's got everything he's got, as opposed to never having taken those courses and maybe not having those experiences. So while they might be not handy or required for what he's doing, I would say the perceived expertise that comes along with having those letters behind his name are highly valuable along the way. Maybe not every single one of those. For example, like just like Eric, I've got the CISSN. Has anyone ever asked me to use that for anything? Not once. But it allows you to say I'm a certified sport nutritionist, right? And so there are times where the perceived credibility is worth the juice is worth the squeeze in some cases for these. So I think some of those I agree with him like in the specific examples, but I would also say Eric's pretty humble and that those things make him who he is and why everybody wants to work with him. So toot your own horn a little bit, E.
I appreciate that. I think I also just kind of like, I don't know, nothing to do with nutrition and like our professional lives, but I have a little bit of like a stoic approach to things. So I don't know. I try not to get like too hyped up with some stuff. Like I've worked with some like crazy high up people in government and I'm just like, cool, like we're all the same. Like no big deal. And that's kind of like my approach to life. But I do appreciate you saying that. And those are definitely good points because in reality, life and what we're living is it's all perceived on how can somebody help or do something in some way. So yeah, so everything has certainly helped me get to where I'm at.
Students, any other burning questions yet?
Don't be shy.
Want to take I'll start sort of down a different path. We'll see if they start jumping in. One of the things we've had in this class are we've had like a whole third of the class was basically textbook information. Now we've had a bunch of speakers. You're actually the final speaker of our middle third of the class. And so what I think we're still missing are some concrete examples that maybe you can help us with, or maybe you can think of a case you've had or a particularly interesting client or something. And maybe you can describe for a few minutes the not just like the outcome, but what did you actually do to enhance that person's life or make them gain weight or lose weight or get more fit or perform better. I don't know if any example from your experiences stand out to you, but it'd be great to have like just a walkthrough of a real life example.
Yeah, I could excuse me, I could think of a few actually. One of them, um, so I was working with this lady. She was my patient. Um, she was at the time approximately 300 pounds or so. The reason I share that is we know that your BMR is directly related to how much you weigh. So how many calories you are expending is directly related to what your overall body weight is. The heavier the person, the more calories are needed. Um, so this lady came to me to help her with weight loss, and she has been struggling with weight. I should say she had been. I haven't spoken with her in a couple of years or so, but um, she had been struggling with weight her entire life. She was, gosh, I forget her age now. Let's say somewhere between 40 and 45 when we were working together. Um, a lot of stress in her life. She has 10 children. 9 of them are adopted. One of them is like she gave birth to the child. Um, she works a government job at a municipality. So a lot of stress comes along with what she does. But she was just like, I'm just not losing weight. Someone who has been on a weight journey they have a pretty good idea of how much they eat and so on and so forth, at least generally speaking, or at least they have good knowledge around, excuse me, these types of things. And she said to me, she was like, I'm eating somewhere around 800 to 1100 calories. To me, I was just like, the math it's not adding up, right? With based on what she's telling me. So I was like, okay, look, let's try to do this. Let's try. I asked her if she was open to tracking her meals, and she was. So that's the first thing. I was like, okay, great. She's open to looking at this, more or less objective data. um, and then I gave her a goal. I said to her, look, try to eat 2100 calories. Okay, let's try to get there. I had calculated her BMR and her total daily energy expenditure, and I forget what it was, but let's just say it was like, I don't know, 2600 or something. So she was like, okay, great. She was on board. The next time that we followed up, uh, she was like, I'm feeling better, because that was another thing. She had no energy levels, but she said, I'm feeling better. I mean, that's pretty awesome. You start eating a little bit more, or at least more regularly, and you start feeling better. To us, maybe we know that, but to someone who's living this very stressful life and is focused on weight loss, but also focused on 10 children, and also focused on working the government work, and so on and so forth, like, she'll put herself last. Um, so she had a couple of aha moments. One of them was, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm eating a little bit more. And when I say eating a little bit more, I told you all before, she was somewhere between 800 and 1100 calories reported. Um, Now she was like, okay, I'm getting to about 1500, maybe 1600 calories on some days. Some days might be a little bit lower, but still, I'm doing better. But then she had the biggest aha moment as to why she wasn't getting the weight loss success that she was in pursuit of. Um, does anybody want to take a guess how many calories she was consuming in the later part of the week?
You mean like the weekend?
Yeah, like Thursday and onward kind of thing. Thursday to Sunday. Any guesses?
We got a 3,200.
Okay.
We got 3,000 up. We got 6,000. Oh, 3,600. I'm going to say 5,000.
All right. These are all really good guesses. But she was at 4,000 calories, right? So she and I call this a compensation mechanism, right? I haven't really seen research on this. Um, Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. I haven't looked for it either, but I just found it fascinating as to how the body knows what it's supposed to do, right? The body knows survival. So what she is doing is not starving herself in the earlier part of the week, but definitely not eating enough. But then in the later part of the week, when she maybe de-stresses a little bit and then starts participating in mindless behavior, not mindful behavior, overconsumption of alcohol, tied in with whatever outings and foods come along with all of that, and then next thing you know, you're at 4,000 calories. So I feel like it's this the in a way is the body compensating for so much stress and not eating enough that it says de-stress and like just do whatever. So that was a really big aha moment for her. And then she started getting the weight to come down. For her exercise, I asked her to just start walking at least once a day, like during her lunch break for 10 minutes, like little things like that. So she did start to see some success there, and then I stopped working at the place. But that's one example of like listening to somebody, helping them realize like, hey, you're maybe not doing what you think you are, even though you have the best intentions. Um, and the second story that I just wanted to share, this one is much shorter. A good friend of mine, him and his wife are good friends of mine. He started up at the gym. His wife has been an avid gym goer for probably all her life, and him not so much. He wasn't the most athletic kid growing up, and now he'll be 55 in February. This was back in 2021 that he started with us. We had a challenge in the gym, and he won the challenge. He had the biggest like body composition change and all of that. But to see this person transform from literally doing nothing, he's an attorney, doing nothing from a physical activity standpoint, maybe going on bike rides with his son and stuff, which is awesome. Now he's like a consistent gym goer. He's participating in the classes, improving his movement and mobility. His body composition changes were phenomenal. But now you have someone who had heart problems in the past, and now he's someone who can lift X amount of weight. He's had a significant decrease in body fat percentage, all by finding the right community to like empower him and inspire him to move a little more and focus on eating a little bit more protein. And it's okay to have a cookie here and there. But his blood work improved drastically. His doctors adjusted his medications, all from movement and dietary related changes. So these things can really go a long way. And the fact that we are able to help somebody on that journey, I think is something that's it's quite gratifying.
I love that. Thanks, E. You talk a lot about the CrossFit community. I know you're ingrained in it and it's part of your life. We haven't really had any discussions in this class about CrossFit and CrossFit nutrition, but I think we should go at the myths surrounding it for a second because you work with that clientele a lot. And at least in the old days, a lot of that was built on like sort of a paleo approach to things for a sport where you're very high intensity. Even the classes are very high intensity. To have sort of very low carbohydrate intake seems a bit absurd now that we know what we know about fuel energetics in this class. Are you still seeing that as what people think they should be doing with CrossFit? And if that's not a thing anymore, what is the thing? Is there some sort of myth you keep hearing around CrossFit and supporting that lifestyle?
Yeah, it's not like CrossFit isn't as like paleo anymore. Well now, like at my gym, people they'll listen to things that I say. I've done seminars and whatnot, so like a lot of people have a better idea. But even with that, even with me like hammering things, like posting things on my social media, hammering things into their brains when we have conversations, it's old habits die hard. And like some people are still kind of like, should I even be eating carbohydrates? They still categorize foods as like this is bad for you. They still look at it in a way that's like, oh, I worked out, so like I can have the pizza. And like trying to work on those relationships for me is an important part of all of this. But now, in general, in CrossFit, not speaking for CrossFit HQ. CrossFit HQ, at least from what I've seen, they're still very like not the biggest fans of carbs and yada yada yada. Like, they're saying of like eat meat and some fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds and little starch, no sugar or whatever the thing is. um, so what you see now is there you have the people who do well like in the CrossFit games. Excuse me, they might be eating like a Snickers bar, right? And some people will be like, oh my god, what is this person doing? But that helps have a conversation of like, hey, the amount of work that these people are putting in, it's okay to have something along those lines. In fact, it's okay to have that at any point in time. We're not necessarily saying that you should have Snickers all the time, but you don't have to like have this fear of food, no guilt around food or anything like that. But at the same time, understanding like this person just, I don't know, did Murph and something else afterwards or whatever. So they've been working for 2 hours here. We're just trying to get fuel in their body in whatever which way. So the paleo thing was huge in CrossFit. The carb fearing messaging was huge in CrossFit. But now I think people are getting a better message. But still, the CrossFit community, even though it might be a little bit different from from society at large. I mean, in part, it's still a microcosm. Like you have everyday people going into CrossFit gyms that are going to hear things left and right. They're going to see the posts that we all see on social media that we're like, all right, here we go. We have to debunk that, bananas are not bad for us. Or, a coworker or a boss is on some kind of diet kick. They fell for, whatever some person with a huge following was saying. Um, so we got to be mindful of that. Like people in CrossFit gyms are just Like they're normal people. Um, but knowing what we know about energy systems in the body and all of that, like we know very well that if you're doing CrossFit, you're more than likely going to be tapping into that glycolytic pathway a good bit, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have carbohydrates in there.
Eric, does that any of that cross over to your work with the OTX? So maybe we've got had a little bit of a military focus the last week or so, and we didn't talk about that. We were actually learning about a different system called H2F, which is coming on board. But with your company, what do you do? Can you describe that a little bit? You said you work with these people, but like, what are you actually doing with them, and what kind of instructions are you giving to these personnel, military personnel?
Yeah. So at O2X and the H2F thing, that's with the Army, the Holistic Health and Fitness initiative that they've been doing, which is pretty cool. Funny enough, I had applied for a job to be an H2F dietitian back in 2021. Didn't get it. But it's a cool initiative because we're focusing on like improving the health of soldiers, right? So at O2X, it's something similar like to H2F. It is wellness focused. But just like I mentioned with the CrossFit community, the military community is it's the same. Like these are Americans. Like these are people that are from the United States in some way, shape, or form, either born here or not, and they've heard some good news on nutrition and not so good news on nutrition. So the education piece is huge. And what we do at O2X, and I'm not a part of like I'm a contractor for O2X. I'm one of their nutrition specialists. Um, the workshops are basically teaching people fundamentals of nutrition. Like when I do a workshop, oftentimes I go into um, understanding macronutrients, why carbs, fat, and protein are important, how they contribute calories in our body, micronutrients, and why vitamins and minerals are important. Like really going into it's like a 3 hour long lecture, oftentimes that I'll do, and they have a lot of good questions too. But it's again, it's like a microcosm of the rest of society. A lot of these groups will have pretty much the same questions, asking about fasting, when's the best time to eat, is breakfast really that important, how much protein should I consume, are frozen fruits and vegetables good or bad, are pesticides good or bad, organic or non-organic, GMO or non-GMO, like do I have to buy some crazy expensive machine for my water? Like these are the things that we're educating these people on. Now, obviously, there are some cases where it's like if it's like a special forces or if it's like a specific group of individuals, maybe we're going to go into more specific details. Um, but and maybe I'm downplaying it a little bit, but in reality, that's pretty much what it is. Like we're just educating people on their nutrition, on their fitness, and how to make it like the slogan is 1% better. So we try to focus on these like very little changes. So if someone is drinking 40 ounces of water, I'm not going to tell them, hey, start drinking half your body weight in ounces. I'll throw that out there so they can have an idea of a metric to maybe work up to. But if they're at 40 ounces, how do I get them to 50 ounces or 48 ounces? Right. So that's kind of what it is. And I do talk on the nutrition front, but we have strength and conditioning specialists that will talk about that stuff. And even though I could probably do the talk too, they have me to do the nutrition. We have people who teach yoga to some of these people, sleep specialists, resilience as well. So it's a bunch of different things that come into play when we talk with either the Army Reserve groups that we've worked with the Navy, the people up at SWAS, the Surface Warfare Officer School in Newport, Rhode Island for the Navy. So that's kind of what it is.
Great. Thanks for that. I think I wanted, you had a question? All right, we got a question now.
Hi, thank you for talking to us. My question is, if a client feels guilty about eating food, how do you convince them to eat more or to follow their diet prescription that you create for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, a lot of people have guilt and fear around food, in large part because of just that the diet culture that has been, you know, very visible in US life for years now. But it comes with learning about their experience and their background, why they're trying to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. In this particular case, if it's weight loss related, the education component is huge. So essentially teaching them what food is, right? So just really quick, on the count of three, I'm gonna say a word, and maybe you all just say it out loud at the same time. And if Mike has the microphone, you just kind of tell me what the resounding answer was. Um, the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word after the number three. 1, 2, 3. Diet.
Food, health, bad. Protein went in my mind. We got 2 proteins, and then we got silence.
Okay, interesting. So nobody said, well, there was one bad. Because typically when I ask that question, and maybe y'all are a little bit more knowledgeable than the average population, and I would hope so in taking Dr. Ormsby's class. Also, side note, you guys are very lucky to have Dr. Ormsby as a professor. If you don't know that or haven't seen that yet, I'm telling you, you are. So historically, the word diet is associated with restriction and fear and like weight loss and sadness and no more joy and I can't have my Oreos anymore. Um, and that is most people's train of thought when they come to see you. When they come and sit down with you and they sit in front of you, that's probably where they're at. So we have to reprogram people's thought process around food. In some cases, it'll happen in one visit. In many cases, it may take days, weeks, months, or even years to reprogram the thought process that is food. And that's where education comes in handy, where you're basically someone's professor who's sitting across from them and you're teaching them a lot of the stuff that you've learned in Dr. Ormsby's class, right? Because it's beneficial for them to know this. Education is a huge step in helping somebody make a behavioral change, but it's oftentimes not enough. Um, so being patient with the person, listening to what they're telling you, that's really a huge part of all of this, is having empathy and listening with compassion and not necessarily always trying to give them the answers, but asking the questions that will better help you help them. So it really isn't this black or white answer that's just kind of like, well, if someone does have guilt, you just got to tell them, hey, stop feeling guilty. Right? Some people may need to hear that. Don't get me wrong, but truly coming from a place of compassion, oh, why do you feel guilty? And asking these probing questions to really get down to, oh, they feel guilty because ever since they were 11 years old, they were hearing that if they're eating this thing, or they heard their mom saying if they ate this thing, they're like, they're going to be super fat. And being super fat means that nobody wants you, and nobody wants you means that you're not a valuable human being. What the hell? Like, but that's some people's train of thought. So we have to kind of get down to the bottom of it by just almost like interviewing this person and then being able to supply compassionate answers with education. And I hope that was a helpful answer.
Thanks, Eek. We got a question?
Thank you for talking with us today.
Sure.
I'm my L1, and you said you program for the police department. Can you kind of talk about the different type of programming you did for them compared to just a regular CrossFit class?
Yeah. I actually found rather quickly that the programming for them can very well be very similar to programming for a regular CrossFit class. Their needs didn't really differ from what general population needed. Maybe by degree, but not by like type of exercises that we were doing. I still had to make sure that they were pushing, pulling, hinging, working their cardio, all mixed in here. And some of these guys, they would come to the classes regular. One of the LTs, one of the lieutenants, he would like give me crap because he was like, dude, I take your classes and I lose weight. He's like, he just wanted to be jacked. But I'm like trying to make sure that this guy like stays pretty jacked and strong, but can also like run if need be. Because if you look like Ronnie Coleman, like you're not chasing anybody. But if you catch them, that's another story, right? So the programming wasn't anything crazy different. But when I was first starting it, I was overthinking it. I was like, oh, I got to work on like these guys are sitting for like too long during the day, so I got to program something like specifically like, get their legs moving and something that can support their hips and like their lower back. But I realized quickly I was just like if I program intelligently and I hit the most important points, their core, their abdominal muscles, their lower back muscles, all that is going to get efficient training. um, if I can be intelligent in coaching them, it's going to be beneficial too, because these police officers, like for the most part, this population, you tell them run through the wall, they want to be the first one to run through the wall, right? Like they want to win in everything that they're doing. So being smart about that. So preventing injury during the workouts was probably a big part of it. But if anything, I would say the programming considerations were very similar to just anything else. Being mindful of the equipment that we have, the space that we have, making sure that everything ran on time for the length of the class that we were participating in. So there was nothing that was really different. Now, if anybody needed specific training, for example, I had a couple of people. One person was um, like a public safety officer, so not a police officer, but she would show up to the scene if there like an aide, like a community service aide. If someone in the community needed help, there was an accident, she'll pull up, make sure that they're safe, like in traffic, until the police officer can get there, and so on and so forth. And she wanted to join the police department as a police officer. So for her, like we would even do some like one-on-one training, or I gave her specific things to work on. If needed during the class, I would give her something different because she really needed to work on her push-ups. So even though my class would help with that, we wanted to be a little bit more specific in the things that she needed. One of the guys that was already a police officer, he failed the SWAT exam, so he was coming to the classes to improve on everything. And he ended up getting into SWAT and into the street crimes unit. And then eventually, I started training the SWAT guys and girls. It was like a once a month that they would meet, and I would put a class together for them. Um, but yeah, I hope that answers the question. There was nothing that was really crazy different for them. Um, but if they needed something different or something very specific, I would make sure that I would incorporate that for the individual. Or if as a whole they needed to improve like their cardio, then maybe my programming would be more targeted towards that, but still supporting muscle. And keep this in mind too. This was everyone from the police department. The chief would take the classes, a couple of captains, a few lieutenants. Did we ever have any of the sergeants out there? I don't remember. And then some like officers that are on patrol, people that work in admin, the detective bureau that is a mix of like sitting at the desk and driving in the car. So this was just like a mix of individuals. And I hope that answers in some way. I hope it's not like too vague or anything.
Thanks, E. All right, we have a few minutes left, and one thing we haven't talked about in this class at all, because there's another class on it next semester, which is about supplements. But I figured in 5 minutes or so, maybe we can talk about one or two that you see popping up now. Maybe you know a little bit about how they work, and I want to avoid the big ones, stuff we all kind of know about. So outside of like creatine and caffeine, is there anything else you're seeing regularly with these people that you work with, and what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah. Well, the tactical community is in large part male dominated. So a lot of these guys are going to ask about like testosterone boosters, or excuse me, or they'll just ask me about like hormone replacement. I will say as a side note, these aren't supplements, but peptides have become huge. So we're seeing peptides left and right. People asking questions about peptides, and I'm just like, they'll ask me questions about a peptide, and I'm like, I've never heard of this peptide before in my life. I feel like there's so many, and they're just kind of popping up. Obviously, the most popular one is BPC 157, and then you have like growth hormone, like that's a peptide as well. Um, but from a supplement standpoint, the testosterone boosters are some that I get a lot of questions about. And ultimately, I'm just kind of like, save your money. and work on something as far as their lifestyle is concerned, because they don't really work, and you can probably just benefit from like getting a little bit more sleep. So if we can work on that, we will. And in a lot of these cases, like some of these guys and girls, they actually do a pretty good job at trying to make these changes. Even if they're sleeping a half hour more, um, I see them implement that. So other supplements that we might see, amino acids are pretty popular in this group, and specifically BCAAs are still quite popular. Um, and it's been interesting to see the rise and fall of BCAAs, because now, especially in the scientific community, the second you mention BCAA, automatically people are like, "Oh my God, that's the worst thing! Like you're wasting your money, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, I mean, they have a time and place, that's for sure. But yes, we do know that based on the literature, if you can take the essential amino acid supplement that has all of the essential amino acids, that would be better than just BCAAs. And if you can get an adequate amount of protein throughout the day, you won't necessarily need to get an amino acid supplement. But there are certain cases, if someone is fasting, and there's a certain cases like as far as like brain is concerned as well, where the branch chains might be beneficial there too. But I do a pretty good bit of like kind of educating on like adequate protein first, if they're looking for just like for muscle support. Adequate protein and calories first. If anything, essential amino acids. And then worst case scenario, it's not bad for you. If anything, it may help, but BCAAs. But if you're gonna get the BCAAs, just get the EAAs. Um, I'm trying to think if there was another supplement, because I do get asked a lot about like creatine and protein supplements. Um, and I was that?
Neurotropics.
Oh yeah, so the nootropics. Some people do ask about them, and they're not as common. But some folks have been asking about uh, just like brain things and whatnot. Oh, and I always forget to mention this. I'm also involved with a company called Electrolyte Boost. That it's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool product. It's like similar to your electrolyte products, but it's a waterless delivery technology. Um, so it's kind of like a candy that you put in your mouth, and it has the electrolytes has got like some B vitamins, vitamin C, and something called cognizin, which does have some research behind it from a cognitive standpoint. But I do get asked about these things, about nootropics, and it's interesting to hear, because some of these people are quite educated on this stuff. Some of these people maybe just listen to like Joe Rogan, and they're like they have questions about it, or they start taking it. Um, but the some of the cognitive ones, and even some of like the adaptogens as well, like ashwagandha, for example, especially when there's like high stress. I get asked about these things a pretty decent amount, but still, I always kind of bring it back to, let's take a quick look at what you're doing from the three fundamentals: nutrition, exercise, and sleep. And then let's add in these supplements to try to help out. Every case is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's situation is different. But those are some of the ones that I'll get asked about.
Thanks. Yeah, I think one of the things that we're starting to see, at least in our research, is we're having to now eliminate people from studies because they're all taking Ozempic. What is your experience with people taking Ozempic, and have you had anybody that you've had to counsel through the use of them and that type of thing?
Yeah, I have. I've worked with a few people taking Ozempic or something similar. Um, to me, it's unfortunate, because the overuse of them is unfortunate. Access to medication is extremely important. These medications most certainly work in most cases for weight loss. But it's unfortunate because as soon as it turns, into pop culture kind of thing, um, celebrities endorsing it, commercials popping up left and right. That's the downside of nutrition and all of that, is the commercialization behind these things, and money that is involved with it. Um, then it just becomes kind of like, you know, early 2000s or 90s, you had phentermine, and that was like the quick weight loss solution. It takes away your appetite, right? The unfortunate side is that people will always, unfortunately, look for the fast solution. Can I just buy the answer? If I can, great. Can I just get a prescription for it and my insurance covers it? Great. We're still always going to have to put in the work. So with these people that I worked with that were on Ozempic, the biggest focus for me was trying to get them to eat enough protein with the little appetite that they had. So shakes were a huge help in those cases, and even then they were probably still not getting enough. And then equally as important is getting them to exercise, getting them to do some form of resistance training, because unfortunately they were so not hungry that their energy levels weren't as best as they should be. So then that takes away from exercising. So now you're not eating enough. You're risking muscle loss because you're not eating enough calories and protein, and the not eating enough is starting to affect your energy, which is now going to impact your desire to go and work out. So the over access to this is an unfortunate one because it's a medication that can be helpful in certain populations, but when people seek and pursue the quick fix and the short route, that's a bit problematic. And as counselors and practitioners, we have to basically help people understand that if they're going on it and helping them understand like, hey, this is what you're going to be taking. So I want you to focus on this, that, and the third. Just like with bariatric surgery, there's got to be an understanding before going into it. And then during the process, we should still be working with these individuals and hopefully we're able to get them off these medications and they're able to live a long, healthy life. But it's been interesting to see these things popping up left and right for the last couple years or so. More so over the last like year and a half, it got really popular. But 2 years, 2.5 years, it's just been like, wow, this is the next Phentermine, basically.
Yep. All right. That's really good insight because I think, yeah, losing more motivation to exercise, by just having these super low energy levels is quite problematic. And we see it everywhere. It's coming up where, I mean, all this, we didn't see it at all. And all of a sudden we're eliminating people because they're on it from a lot of these studies. And we recently have had a few conversations with local physicians where they're writing it left and right because they also want to be taking it. So it's really ever present and it's not going away because it's so effective.
For sure. Yeah, agreed.
Do we have any last questions from the students?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, it's your chance. Maybe they'll see you at ISSN this summer. When is that again?
June 23rd to 25th, if I remember correctly, is down here in South Florida. I think it's Delray Beach, if I'm not mistaken.
Erik attends all these and he's just a gracious host a lot of times when you were running the shop there for a minute as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. Really appreciate your time. Let's give him a round of applause, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, man.
Thanks, Dr. Ormsby.
I'll be in touch, man. Thank you.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.